Catus Maximus here. This is my top 5 favorite 3/8 inch drive classic ratchets. Selection's a bit different than the 1/2 inch drive, of course, with classic ratchets. And even though I do have, say, a Bonnie and a New Britain type ratchets in 3/8, I also have other ones to make it select from. So that's what I've done. And out of all these, what I'll start off with is all these companies, 2 of them, Proto and Right Tools, are the 2 companies that are still around compared to Eastco, Wizard, and of course Walden. But out of all these companies, like this Right from 1946, it's not only still around, they're still a privately owned family tool corporation, just showing that you don't have to sell out if you really just like making tools and you just want to keep your business private and continue to make tools and be efficient. Or I shouldn't say, well, actually maybe efficient is right, because they're still around, actually, just like Lyle Tools. And so this is one of my favorite ones just because I like this design. This is from 1946, so the year after World War II ended, and it's actually a surprisingly modern design. Now, as we know, this is a 75-year-old ratchet, and it is pretty coarse teeth, only 16 teeth, but nice design, nice size, nice and lightweight, really works well. One of the things I really appreciate by a lot of these older ratchets is the low position of the reverse lever. It's really just more convenient to use if you have it in the wrong direction. Just super easy just to flip up and reverse it. You don't have to change your hand position. Manufacturers change their designs just because this is more complicated. As you can see, there are 3 screws. There's a bit more machining. There's extra parts because you have the anvil, the pawl, and the switch, but they're all being separate components. Means that they have more work and are a little bit more expensive. So that's why ratchets are more simple these days. The easiest way of putting it, say, more compact, like this slightly more modern Eastco, which I'm not sure when that's from, maybe 70s or 80s. But this thing actually had a pretty thin profile, which would be respectable totally for today. Nice strong detent, and I always like to support Right Tools because generations of people have worked for this company and they've always been around for them. Here's a Wizard. This, I believe, was made by Indestro. This is the same as the Montgomery Ward Powercraft 100 series ratchets. I do like these ratchets because they are thin tooth. They have pretty decent anvils. They are pretty well sealed. They're not the strongest mechanism. It's just a single tooth design. But I always kind of like this ratchet because it had a really thin profile. Makes the handle really lightweight. So when and it has like a snap-on level detent, but once you get it faster and loosened, you can do this thing where you whip the ratchet back and forth real quick. And this Wizard really is one of the best for doing that. I also like the fact that for a round head, it's pretty darn compact. Really like its general operation. The reverse switch isn't the easiest to use, but it's not the worst either. You can do it with one finger if you get a little more used to it. But I always like this little Wizard ratchet. Actually, surprisingly enough, these are sold at, like, I believe, auto parts stores. And not a lot of Wizard tools are sold. Haven't seen many of those ratchets. Of course, we have an Eastco here, which was bought out by Apex Tool Group, Danaher, Gear Wrench. Gear Wrench bought out Allen and shut them down, bought out Armstrong, shut them down, bought out Eastco. In 2010, they shut down the very last of the original factories that they had acquired from Eastco. Eastco was a part of a hostile takeover. One of the early ones, and that's what ended up happening to them, is they didn't really protect their corporation because they should have kept it essentially private, and owners and investors at the time were more willing to sell out. And that's kind of the sad part about it, is even if you are a private company, if you end up having investors or people who own portions of your company, and together it's more than 50%, then vulture funds, rich people, can come in and offer your to buy out your investors' interests until they collect up more than 50% of the company, and then all of a sudden now they own it. So you have to be careful about that. I'm sure Right Tools over the years had plenty of investors, but they were able to prevent them from wanting to sell out Right Tools, and thus they're around today still as a private company. This is the company that made the really nice Craftsman ratchets that use this same design. This happens to be a non-quick release. Eastco always did make some pretty darn nice tools. Real shame what Apex Tool Group ended up doing to them, but this was the favorites, especially with the Craftsmans, just because they're just so heavy duty, well made. The snap ring that independently holds in the reverse lever, the anvil, and the bottom cap, which is actually a thick, even on this 3/8, it's pretty darn thick. Really strong, well supported, reasonably well sealed, because the way these snap rings, they expand into a very carefully machined depth of the slot, so they run halfway into this and halfway into this, forming a little convolution on both sides, actually aiding in pretty decent sealing. Pretty darn tight anvils most times, so there always was good tolerance in these Eastco ratchets. And their Craftsman counterparts, really like these units, and they're one of my favorite just because of that. They were the company that made the good Craftsman stuff. I don't know how this is getting so long. We'll stop with this is a Walden. This is a Walden. I'll talk about it last. This is an old Proto, a 5257. This is a -4. When you look up old Proto ratchets, when you see the dash number, you want the -4s or newer, because they upgraded to dual pawls instead of single pawls. And the reason I like this Proto is it's old. It's not actually finished very well at all. I mean, this thing's lopsided. Chrome has started peeling. Just not the best looking Proto, and that's actually generally what Proto tools are. They just aren't finished the best, but they certainly do work. This one has been putting in work for decades and still works great, and this is essentially what why it's one of my favorites, because it's just an old, funky looking flex head ratchet that does what you expect it to do, which is continue to work and ratchet and not give you trouble over many, many years of use. Really like this. Pretty fine teeth. This thing has never skipped on me or actually ever given me any issues. Even when I didn't even clean it for like the first 6 months I owned it. But really do like it quite a bit. And this is one of the earlier fine-toothed ones, and that's one of the reasons I use 2 pawls, just to give it a bit of extra traction. And just a great overall round head ratchet. And I guess one of the caveats to it is, even though the head's pretty tall, if we compare to this Walden, it's actually not even that narrow in diameter, but it has a reasonably narrow diameter for a round head ratchet. As far as compared to, say, a lot of pear heads, it's about the same width as quite a few pear heads, like that Eastco. It's a little bit narrower than this right, and always like this. It's a great example of, really what Proto tools are. Is they're ugly, but they're reliable. And of course, the last one, and it's not very easy to find Walden tools, but Walden, here's the deal: when interchangeable sockets, that means the ability to this style of design of tool, a ratchet with some type of anvil and a socket with some type of broach that you can snap on and off, hence where the Snap-on Tool Company came from. Actually turns out that in 1917, Walden was already working on a set of interchangeable sockets. Apparently, a couple years before Snap-on, 1919 was when Snap-on came out. But we know what happened to Walden, and we know what happened to Snap-on. And two real reasons. One, Walden just didn't have the cash money to change out to buy new forgings and build new dies to release their interchangeable socket set until 1920. And in that 3-year period, Blackhawk released their interchangeable socket set, and Snap-on released theirs. And Snap-on had, as we know, their super aggressive sales strategy, which is what well, first, Snap-on did make really nice quality tools, but that super aggressive sales strategy is obvious how effective it was, because they're still around today, and Walden is long gone. Walden actually held on all the way through the 90s, but somehow, and very unfortunately, that hiccup all the way back in the 1910s and 20s pretty much hobbled them for the rest of their life, and they weren't able to really recover after that, and then end up going the way of the dodo. But I thought that this round head ratchet was just a great example of classic Walden. Pretty chunky ratchet mechanism. innovative reverse lever, because you can see it has a hole in it, and so you turn it like that. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So you kind of grip it around the edge. It also has a unique design where it uses kind of like two different slide pawls. So very interesting ratchet. Sometimes it doesn't quite reverse as well as I would like it to. So the design, it's obvious why why nobody else has knocked off this particular ratchet design, because it can be a little bit funky and less than reliable, even though this one's well cleaned. And so that's what I liked about this one so much, is just because it has a nice, elegant, pretty smooth and just elegant design. Nice handle. I like the torpedo handle. They use really coarse knurling, but it's split. Always was a really nice looking round head ratchet on this Walden. And surprisingly enough, they actually had beaten snap onto the whole interchangeable socket thing, but couldn't get the product out the door. And then just literally in a 2 to 3 year period, that made the difference of Walden surviving it in the long haul, and they didn't. Kind of example to show, even if you have a good product, if you can't get it out the door and you can't get people who are aware of it, it doesn't matter how good it is, because not enough people are going to buy it to keep you in business. Anyway, I don't know how this one ended up being so long. I guess I talked a little bit more about tool history in this one than my previous half-inch drive 5 favorite classic ratchets. But in 3/8, definitely I had a different selection of ratchets, and so a lot of them with a bit more history to talk about. So just wanted to share that with y'all. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.